Welcome everyone to this session of Advisory Design Panel for Thursday, October 18th. We will start by acknowledging that this meeting is held on Squamish Nation traditional territory. Can I have someone to move the adoption of the agenda? Sarah? Second? Okay. And the meeting minutes, has everyone had a chance to review those? Any comments? Can I move that we, or can I have someone to move that we adopt the meeting minutes from last meeting? A second? David, second. And then we'll introduce our new members, actually, is what we're going to do now, that just joined the Advisory Design Panel. Carlos Avarche, Mike Van Kappel, Graham Winterbottom, and David Arnott. And what we'll do is we'll just go around the table right now for everyone and just introduce ourselves so we all get to know each other.
Hi, I'm David Arnott, architect with Stark Architecture, which is based in Vancouver, but I live in Squamish.
Dwayne Severst, Integra Architecture, Principal Partner Architect. This will be my second term.
Susan Stratus, I'm a planner working with the district on a number of development applications.
I'm Jessie Fletcher, a planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department.
Sarah Clare, assistant.
Mike Ankbell, I have a construction company in town.
Carlos Varse, I work for Cornerstone Developments here in town.
Jenna Bridgko, landscape architect with PWL Partnership, and it's also my second term now.
Hi, sorry for being late. Graham Winterbottom, new member at large resident here, planner by trade, and director of real estate and community development at Great Northern Lake Campus Trust in Vancouver.
Okay, welcome everyone to Advisory Design Panel. I guess we will move on to our business for the day, and that's the first project at 38931 Queensway.
So again, my name is Jessie Fletcher. I am a planner with the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. For the new members, I'm going to quickly go over the process on how you guys typically will assess the projects. So first, generally, I'll introduce the project, or the planner will introduce the project briefly. Then we have the project architect and landscape architect come up and give you an overview. Following that, there are direct questions to go around the table, so everybody will have an opportunity to ask questions about your project. Following that, there will then be a round of comments on the project, which will form part of the recommendation that the panel will vote on at the end. But to the project. So today I'm here to introduce a development permit application for a new industrial building in the Sea to Sky Business Park on Queensway at 38931 Queensway. The proposed building will have a gross floor area of 2,300 square meters. The development is located in the light industrial I-1 zone, which permits light industrial uses such as automobile-oriented commercial, heavy equipment sales, motor vehicle repair shops, fitness studio, restaurant to a maximum of 50 seats, and alcohol beverage manufacturing. The proposed development is located in Development Permit Area 6, Squamish Industrial Park and BC Rail Industrial, and is subject to the applicable Development Permit Area guidelines, which you'll find in your report. This project came in under our previous official community plan that has now been repealed, but is still being judged under those guidelines. So staff are generally supportive of the site plan and specifically request Advisory Design Panel's recommendations on building permit character and landscaping as it pertains to the DPA 6 guidelines. Staff will briefly note that there are still a few zoning items that need to be resolved, including the width of the landscape strip, the length of the parking stalls, the number of accessibility spaces on the parking lot, the projection of the canopies into the setback, and the 2 Class A bicycle storage spaces that are associated with the caretaker unit. And I'll now pass it over to the architect and landscape architect to take you through the project.
Hello everyone, I'm Nadi Narjasuri from M+ Architecture. I'm the principal architect. We are based in North Vancouver. Today I will give you more information
information about the site and our challenges in the design and how we try to resolve the problems. The site is located on the southwest corner of Queensway and Industrial Way. The land is around 1 acre, and we're proposing roughly 25,000 square foot. This property is zoned as light industrial. I have pulled out some pictures about the neighborhoods and what we see from the site. On the north, there is an empty lot currently used as a parking lot, this is looking towards the north. We are looking to the north, and on the west side, we are looking at the mountains. That's west of the property. On the east side, across the street from Queensway, is Cal Tire. This view is from the property on the south, is another light industrial. This is looking to the south, west from industrial view. We are looking at the mountains again. Looking to the south of the property, Cal Tire, and this is the parking lots. As you can see here, we are having a railway on the west side. On the north, that's the empty lot. And there are some industrial developments on the south side of the property that we're proposing. There are some vegetations on the land that some of them has been identified as invasive plants, and we are removing them by supervision of our environmental consultants. The site has been preloaded for the past 6-7 years, and our geotechnical engineer is proposing to go with slab on grade and path widthing supported on piles. Access to the site is from the south. This is a driveway right in, right on. There are 2 fire hydrants within 15 meters from the buildings. We're proposing 2 loading bays and a garbage enclosure with no visibility to the site. The garbage enclosure and the recycling bins has been designed per guidelines of City of Vancouver to maximize the waste management. We are proposing accessible stalls near the building entry with a let down for easy access. The site has been enriched by landscape buffer on north, west, and south to create a green frame from and create some sort of screening from adjacent neighborhoods. The offsite work includes proposing a new bike lane and as well as a new pedestrian access, which is this one. We are proposing the pedestrian sidewalk next to the building property to make it to create a protected area for pedestrian to walk. The buildings is connected to the district sidewalk by a set of stairs almost in the middle of the property, and to create the interaction with the neighborhoods. The site is well lit. The parking lots, we're proposing lights on the pole to create a safe and secure parking lot in the evenings. Along the Queensway, we are having a ground-mounted flashlight that's washing the face of the building, which enhance the character of the building. We are having another set of lightings right behind a retaining wall, which is acting as our flood management protection. And I will give you more information about how we try to how we achieve the high water and flood boiler. Per flood boiler, we need to maintain a 1 to 5 slope, and the building should be below that. Based on the location of the building, we come up with an alternative solution that has been, the concept has been approved by engineering department of the district. This retaining wall will be designed by geotechnical engineer and is protecting the building against the flood, and it's been set back like 13 feet from the property line and will contain the same amount of water as if we have located the building within that 1-5 slope. This is the main floor. We're proposing 4 potential units. It could be a dance studio, yoga studio, 2 warehouse, and a brewery or a restaurant with limited of 50 seats. Upper floor, we are proposing a residential unit limited to 750 square foot and another warehouse, access to the rooftop. We have allocated 2 exit stairs and elevators. All the rooftop units are located on the upper roof, so the lower deck is clear from all the mechanical system. On the upper roof, we are proposing screening around the rooftop unit, which is barely visible from the street. All the mechanical systems are high efficiency VRV system. And about the building, since this site has a high visibility from Queensway, we are proposing the building right on the setbacks to create a pedestrian friendly and create attractive streetscape to the Queensway. We will see the retaining wall here, which is treated with landscaping, and with the lighting provisions that we're having, it's going to create a very nice ambient in the evening as well. The shape of the building is being dictated by the shape of the land and the setbacks and site limitations. We are proposing a simple form and mass. We are using one cladding material, most probably a metal cladding with a tone of copper, to bring some warmth to the ambient of the city and create some contrast with the gray sky that we are going to have most of the year. To enhance the characteristic of the building, we're introducing lots of glazing with multiple shapes, especially at the corners. We're opening up the corners with irregular geometry to bring more lights to the building and make the building more attractive. We are introducing canopies painted in black to create some contrast. These canopies we're having 2 levels of canopies, 4 feet wide on the lower level. They also create weather protection, mostly on the west side, as all the entrances are there, and some higher canopies are 2 feet wide. This is another view. This is the view from industrial. We're looking to the southwest, and mountains in the back, and these are the canopies. And you can see the retaining walls. And this is the proposed bike lane and pedestrian access. This is our west elevation. Basically, most of the units will access to their main entrances here, and most of the entrances are through the west side. We are proposing more glazing on that side to create some sort of this is looking to the parking lot. So with the amount of glazing that we are proposing, it will create an eye on the parking lot for more safety and security of the site. We also are providing high quality illuminated letter channeling, which will be installed on the canopies. And another item that I really like to emphasize is currently the building code the guidelines for this building is to meet step code, energy code step 2. We are volunteering to go with a step 3. The entire team is willing to set a standard of a high quality, high efficient building at this area. From day one, we have worked with our building envelope engineer, mechanical engineer, and modern energy advisors. to get to the highest efficient building that we can. Step 2 is like 10% better than base building code, and step 3 is 20%. We're achieving that by using triple glazing. So we are having 5 months of glazing, and they're all going to be triple glazing. All the exterior, we are using exterior insulation, 5-inch exterior insulation all around the building and on the rooftop. So basically, this is an integrated design, and we are receiving a report that we can meet the standards. The glazings have a U value of 1.2. Currently, the standard of the industry is like 1.8 or 2, but we are going for 1.2 U value. These are about the building that I can say, and I would ask Christina to walk you through the landscape design. Thank you.
I'm Christina Celine. I'm a landscape architect based out of Whistler and a planner as well. So our design approach for the landscaping for this building essentially was to complement the architecture, soften the presence of the building on the street, provide some screening, keep it simple, clean, and complement the colors of the building. The planting, as Nadia said, along Queensway, you see in a couple of strips. So I'm just going to go to the site plan. And it's on 2 levels because of the retaining wall. What we're proposing for the retaining wall is a stack block, Allen block, the Aztec. There's a tiny picture of it in the bottom left-hand corner. It's a little hard to see. You might see it better on the paper copies. It's a nice square stack, a little bit random. We did not specify the color yet, but we're thinking that the color could be that kind of a natural color or something to complement the building. There is a proposed black railing on the top of the wall that would match the architectural details, and also essentially it has a very low profile, so it probably will fade away with the plantings. We have a combination of tall grasses and trailing yew and cotoneaster, some hardy plants that we would like to see along the back of the railing between the wall and the walkway that's adjacent to the building, and then having some of these trailing things come over the wall, sort of like in that picture. And then in the planting buffer in between the wall and the sidewalk, we are proposing a variety of plants, different heights of shrubs flowering at different times, trying to create a kind of a robust variety in there. We've proposed some lilacs in there as well. Most of the trees are, the trees that are proposed on the Queensway side all adhere to the planting near hydro lines guidelines, BC Hydro. So the plants that we chose there all are recommended within that guideline. So they don't impede the access to the hydro lines. So we've got some lilacs in there, and then we have amber maples proposed along the street. And those, as in the rendering, they go a great, oops, I've done it. They go a beautiful red color in the fall. Okay, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, the trailing ground cover. So what we're trying to do is keep things very robust and kind of low growing in the front. In the parking area, in and around the back, there we have some taller trees to create some shade, sort of combating the heat island effect. And we also have some crab apples that are flowering white. They're near the entrance. So those just kind of denote the points of interest in areas where people would be coming in and out of the building or stopping to park their bikes and that kind of thing. There is a rain garden proposed in the middle of the parking lot. And so and that's part of the stormwater management for the site. The plants in there are typical rain garden plants, species like salmonberry, snowberry, spirea, bugleweed. These are plants that can withstand being wet at times and then also very dry at times, because that's how typically those rain gardens work. The planted islands in the parking lot have red maples proposed to allow for some shade. And then under that in the islands, we proposed oak grass to create a carpet and a foundation for them. The snow storage area up in the top left corner proposed to contain mugo pines and dogwoods, sort of mugo pines in the front and then the dogwoods in the back. Those are very hardy and can withstand having snow piled on them for a considerable amount of time, and they come back every year. The connectivity, again, there's connections to Queensway to the upper level via stairs, and then through the driveway entrance there's a continuous walkway that goes all around the building. And the bicycle racks are located in areas that are convenient for pedestrians and for cyclists, and that are also safe. The buffer along the outer edge of the parking, so on the north side of the property, we proposed a hedge-like material. It's a combination of Leyland cypress and thuya. Those can be trimmed to be any kind of shape or height that you like. They have a nice contrast to each other as well. So that's what we're proposing along that edge. And then all along the west and the southwest borders, there's a combination of Oregon grape, holly, and mock orange ground covers. And I think that's all I have outside. There are yews as well proposed in the near the entrance. The other thing we should mention is that there are some existing trees on that west border property line, and we are going to try to keep those poplars that exist there. There are some hostas and ferns also in some of the shady areas. I think that pretty much covers it. And also there an irrigation plan will be provided by a licensed IABC certified irrigation consultant. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything?
Great, thank you. Okay, now what we usually do is go with a round of questions. And I'll start with Jenna. You
Sure.
ready?
Sounds good. Would you be able to speak to in the site plan, the parking stalls are overhanging over the landscape? If you could speak to sort of the design rationale or site planning challenges that led to that?
Yes, what we're proposing is, first we do not want to use any villa stop because we know that at the time of winter they will break down. So we want to have a landscaping and asphalt. We are proposing low shrubs and tolerant shade plants as we went through the landscape design with Christina. So the car overhang, actually the shrubs will be okay with that overhangs. They are shade tolerance and low shrubs. And another reason why we went with this approach is we were able to go with the same amount of 2'6" overhang in other municipalities, and we were fine, so we use the same design approach to this. Another item I would like to mention that we are going with a very high efficient building and sustainable site. We are proposing very good infiltration to slow down the water flow, and we are hoping to get some incentives back if still does not meet the requirements.
And with regards to the roof, what materials were you looking to use on the roof? Were you considering a green roof or materials that kind of follow the lead from the perspective?
It's pavers on pedestals that you are using on the roof deck that we have.
And then if you could just speak to the metal cladding, is that intended to be weathered steel or is it intended to be?
Our original thought, and as you will see on the renderings, is supposed to be a corten steel, exposed with open web joist and a screwed on mounting to create that sort of industrial looking, but we're still exploring other options.
Thank you.
Could you just speak a bit more, you kind of mentioned what the uses of each unit
Yes.
were, but as kind of the interaction of that unit 5 and how it interacts with the rest of the building.
Basically, on Unit 1, we're aiming to go with a dance studio or a yoga studio or fitness. Unit 2 and 3 are going to be used for warehouse, and Unit 4 is going to be used for a restaurant, and we're having a patio right on this side, and that's the use on lower floor. On upper floor, we are going with a warehouse and small residential unit, like a caretaker facilities.
Okay, so, and would the restaurant you propose be part of a brewery? Is that what you mentioned?
Could be, yes.
Okay. Next question about siding. That's great. And was there any exploration of roll-up doors as part of the
Yes,
treatment here?
there was, but as we're aiming for a high efficient building, we are eliminating those doors and trying to go with a double door instead to meet the code requirements.
That's all for me.
Sorry. I guess one of my main questions was about the irrigation required and the plants that were chosen. Obviously, that was something that was taken into account, maybe dry weather plants, things like that, water, and also the water catchment.
Yeah, so the rain garden area?
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are recommended for that kind of an application for, a rain garden catchment area for infiltration. And the rest of the plants are pretty standard landscape plants that you would use in a treatment that's against a road, where you might end up with snow dump or in some cases road salt, things like that.
And then my next question was going to be about the sidewalk. The property next to it, so I guess southwest side, does that continue through? How does that line up with what's beside it?
The proposed sidewalk is what we are, it doesn't exist right now. This is what we're proposing. So I believe it will, the design, and I believe the design will be carried on. I'm not sure, sorry.
The sidewalk will need to line with any existing sidewalk, and I believe there's a sidewalk on either side right now, so it'll set the standard engineering review line and are happy if the sidewalk is up against the property line.
That's all I have.
Can you just verify, so the length of the parking stalls, are they 17.6 or are they 15?
I have a light. I believe they were 12 feet tall. I don't have. $20 feet high. Which is
20 feet long.
done.
The length of the parking stalls?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was okay. They were 21. 15% of the parkings are small parkings. The rest are standard size, which are 9 by.
So maybe I should be more specific. The accessible stalls, how long are they? the accessible parking zone?
They are 19 feet long, and we allowed a 5-foot walkway to get out of the car.
Okay, that's all the questions.
Sorry.
Just a couple questions in and around loading. Would loading be studied by a traffic engineer at all this time?
Not at this time.
Just to double check on exiting and compliance, the fire truck access would be deemed to be most likely at the back. I just wanted to know that you have a chance to check fire truck access.
We located the fire enunciator right on the Queensway. So basically where there is a stairs, that's where we're having a fire enunciator, which is within 50 meters southwest.
And then just a question around accessibility. What would be the accessible from the sidewalk approach? Are you grading from the sidewalk up to where the elevator is in some way?
Basically,
There's a question.
yes, your question is accessing from outside to the.
Accessible measures based on the building code. So the accessible vehicle insurance.
Basically, this building is mostly designed to access by car. Based on the height limitation that we have, we were not able to provide that access.
Just to try that.
Yeah, in which case, so I'll phrase this as a question. Would it be, in order to meet the accessible measures, would you be able to then therefore widen the drive aisle to accommodate accessibility? If the grading were less than 5% or ramp side? It may be something isn't.
Yeah, we can consider that, yes.
I think there's a code question.
Okay, yeah, I'll double check,
And
thank you.
then the last thing was just, is there a building code consultant review this at all?
Yes, we have a building code consultant.
Okay, so the issue might be a question, maybe I'll leave for comments in and around exits and how exits actually work for the front, based on the fact that you're not exiting beyond 10 feet.
We actually discussed that with our consultants, and his comment was, since we're proposing 2 exits,
Okay.
one of them is already mixed.
One from the back or something, perhaps that's the
Yes.
answer? Okay, otherwise, as a question, I'll put the code consultant down to the answer, and I'll leave it back. Great, thank you.
Yeah, the sidewalk access there along the front of the building at Queensway, immediately next to the building, is there any opportunity to have wider staircases or more of them down to there? Because it feels like the building is maybe sort of removed and sort of kept behind that.
We can have wider stairs, if it's required. Right now it's 4 feet wide.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if you're at that top corner unit and you've got to come back down, come down there. The core 10 or the orange metal is a big difference. Core 10 with patina over time, it sort of looks rough and industrial, and I know if it's a sort of, a sort of more solid orange color, it's certainly going to look drastically different. Is that something that will be decided soon?
Absolutely, yes. We have tested the material since we started designing the building. We actually have a sample I can over. And we are seeing the color changes and trying to explore other ideas to make sure that whatever we see is. But what we have experienced is after a year, after a certain time, the color changes will stop. So that brownish color will stay.
Yeah. Okay. The next one, just like bicycle parking. I see that you've met the minimum
Yes.
requirements. If this is going to be a 4,000 square foot brewery restaurant, it would be probably a good idea to have more bicycle parking. I know that when I'm at A-Frame next door, there's 25 bicycles down at the front. And then also, I don't know how you get bicycles if I was going to one of these units along the front, where I would take my bike.
If I may interrupt, we're just doing questions right now, and then
Oh,
we'll
just
come
questions.
around for comments on the
Okay, cool.
second go around.
So,
No
that's
problem.
my first time, so. Another question, are the maples along Queensway, are they red maples?
No, they're amber maples. So
Are
that
they
means
green?
they go red in the fall, but they're green in general.
Okay.
And they are not as tall or wide as a red maple. So they grow under 20 feet.
Okay.
They're more shrubby kind of looking.
Okay, cool. That's all my questions, sorry. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I was wondering if you just clarify the weather protection. I heard from staff that the awnings project into the setback, but my understanding from reading the report was that they did not project far enough to cover the sidewalk. So if you just clarify and comment if there's full weather protection for pedestrians along the frontage.
Okay, on the north and on the west, along the Queensway, I noticed that we have encroached setbacks, and we are only allowed the overhang is supposed to be 0.76 millimeter, which is, we are reducing our overhangs on that side. And on north, there's no pedestrian access. Along the Queensway, this is basically our second exit, so it's not like a major walkway, but we are keeping them 4 feet along the parking lot, which are the main entrances. These are our weather protection on the other side, which are the main entrances, and they are going to be 4 feet wide. On this side, there is no conflict with the setbacks. It's facing the parking lot.
Sorry, there's no conflict on the main frontage on Queensway.
No.
Where is the conflict?
The conflict is on this side,
Okay.
that we encroach 4 feet, supposed to be like 2 feet 28 inches,
Okay,
and we are reducing them.
okay. And the reason there's additional is there an entrance on that side, or why is it projected?
Just enhance, to add some character to
Enhance
the
the
building,
corner.
create some shades and so on.
Okay, thanks. And then the rainwater feature that's in the island on the parking lot, I just wondered if you could comment on the stormwater performance of that.
Historical performance of that, or this is being connected to the stormwater drainage system, so it'll work very well because it's not just relying on infiltration. The civil engineers have designed it, though I haven't, so I can't really speak to that
Okay.
performance of it, or how they actually are connecting it. But do you have? Civil drawings probably aren't even a part of this package right now. But
Yes, they are part of this package. They have calculated the stormwater infiltration, and this is the area was approved by them.
Okay, sure,
Yeah.
that's it for me.
If I might clarify, the zoning, is it I1 or I8?
I1.
I1 zoning here. When we have our parking ratios for developments like this, is there a different ratio applied for different uses in the property requirement basis, or is I1 just a set ratio?
Through the zoning bylaw doesn't set a different one based on the zone, but having knowledge of what the uses would be, we have had the applicant calculate their parking based on their proposed uses.
Proposed
so
use
Not
Okay.
the industrial standard.
as restaurant and fitness center?
As a restaurant of 50 seats and as a fitness center.
Okay. I'm having a little problem understanding how the elevator works from these diagrams. It seems to be wrapped in a circular stair. Is that where it's proposed to be?
It's basically working as a lift, but it meets the requirement of the code. We're looking at second floor.
So that is an elevator in the middle of the stairs, so,
Yes,
yeah.
but at the main lobby and entry.
Okay, assuming that the stairs would wrap in a way that it allows entry, and at the bottom, is that a loading entry into the building? Where the elevator starts on the main floor?
The elevator door is right in front of the main entry, and the stairs, the first stairs starts from the right side and goes up. And as we go to the second level, it's going to be a landing.
Could be the graphics of the drawing is.
Did you go,
Yeah.
did you go on one side of the elevator and exit the other?
No, both.
I think just to, well, you would, no, you enter on the bottom and then you come out the rear of the upper. It would just appear to be the graphics of the stair, the way
Yes,
it's drawn.
right.
I think they're showing hidden lines above perhaps, in which case it looks like. So
Mhm.
the solid lines would dictate the stair and the dotted lines would indicate above in this case.
Yeah. I'm just curious on the main floor if there's loading doors that you basically go right into the elevator from the exterior. Is it? It's kind of hard to
There is
tell.
no loading door, it's just a standard door. Can be higher to meet the,
Okay,
It's like
so
exit door.
you're proposing warehouse use on the top floor? And this, I assume this elevator is how you would load up and down into that top floor if you had large items?
that's a good comment. It could be also used as a light manufacturing. That's another use we were thinking. That's a very good comment.
Okay. Well, I'll bring that back as a comment, but there's just a question right now. Okay, have you done a study for truck circulation? If you had large trucks coming to this building for some kind of future use, how would they?
This is a light industrial, and we can have a 30-foot trucks getting to the loading zone, and they need to back up. There's no, they cannot do that. They have to back up.
So they would back up from Queensway to come in? Is that the intention?
But we are not expecting large trucks coming to this unit based on the uses that we are proposing.
Okay. Well, you never know. Depending on the tenants, some of them do have large trucks and
Another,
deliveries. Yeah. So, in each of these units on the main floor, is there roll-up doors on the parking lot side for access?
there is no roll-up.
No roll-up doors,
Doesn't-
just all standard
They are going to be 10-foot high.
10-foot, but normal swing doors?
Swing doors, double swing doors, yes. And the reason is meeting the energy efficiency. Roll-up
Okay.
door wouldn't meet that standard.
Okay. All of my other questions have been answered previously. So,
One more question.
absolutely.
Something that I thought was in the report that we didn't talk about yet was the potential roundabout at Industrial Way and Queensway. And is a roundabout feasible if this development were to go forward?
The intersection at Industrial and Queensway is still under review. This would need to comply with that. And the impacts of that we're not entirely sure yet, but so they have to.
But it would go first? That design of that intersection?
That design would dictate what would happen to this, yes.
Okay.
Sorry. No problem. Okay, so thanks for all your answers, and we will proceed into the comments section. And I'll start with Jenna once again.
So thanks for your presentation overall. I think the building offers a really interesting form and character. It certainly limits the opportunity for use. It sounds like the tenants that you're looking at are applicable to the form and character of the building, so that works, but just something to keep in mind. With regards to the weathered steel, I think it's a very interesting material to be proposing. One caution I have is just with regards to the wear and tear of people interacting with the wall. People leaning on it, touching it, putting objects on it may cause some long-term staining or tarnishes. So I think not to say don't use it, but to be mindful of what that might mean and how then the open space may have to be designed in a way to ensure that interaction doesn't occur. You know, someone taking a coffee break and laying on the wall would really over time start to wear. So I just encourage you to be mindful of that. It's great to see the incorporation of rain gardens. It's nice to see. It'd be great if there were some trees that are rain garden friendly. I think overall the planting selection is really thoughtful. With regards to the parking overhang, ultimately I think the site is just really jam-packed, so it's really hard to get the parking to work without that happening. So just encouraging you to ensure that the planting in that area is just really thoughtful to what that relationship means with the car and the planting. With regards to the public realm along Kingsway, the sidewalk in front of the building, I think, is too narrow. That should really read as a space and a frontage of the building. If someone was to open the door, that walkway really effectively is unusable. And so I would encourage you to look at opportunities to see how that could be widened, create almost not a plaza, but a plaza-like linear space that can function with the idea that all doors will open at once. And I echo some of the questions that I presume will turn to comments with regards to the staircases in the front. I think that grand, larger gesture of entry would be very positive for the space. And then just with regards to that again, with accessibility, I would encourage you to test what would be possible to allow for an accessible entry from Queensway rather than sending them through the parking area. I appreciate that would change the form and character of the front, but I think it's a really important study to take a close look at. And then just with regards to the design of the railing, I would just double check what railing is used where, because it seems that there's some railing that is hindering a 2-foot drop that's in excess of 2 feet, but it is acting more as just a line rather than a true guardrail. So just take a look at that detail and ensure the guardrail is where it needs to be located. Those are my comments. Thank you.
I like the looks of this building. I struggle a bit with its location and it being a light industrial building. It's beautiful, and I think it's awesome that you're going for step 3, because in a light industrial building that is very hard to do. So I commend you on that. But I think in doing so, if you're doing so by giving up roll-up doors, for instance, or reducing the accessibility of this building in the back of the house by truck, you're really limiting the scope of the type of users that you can attract, and so the light industrial part of the building kind of disappears and it just becomes more light industrial. And it's in the zoning, and you're a private landowner, so I think it's totally it's fair, but just something I think we all need to be cautious of. I think it could be quite attractive in the long term. I hope that you go with Core 10. I echo the same concerns. I know I worked on the wayfinding project in Whistler a couple years back, and we looked at Core 10 quite a bit. And we were really afraid of, if someone puts their hand mark on the Core 10, it could stay there. Or if graffiti was on there, you have to kind of grind it off. That said, when I was visited Chamonix a few years ago, they have this beautiful Core 10 building there, and it has so much character, and there were parts of the building that had to get shaved off because there was graffiti on it, but I think it added to that kind of raw industrial look, so I thought it was quite cool. If you go that route, some sort of rock treatment or drainage along the base of the building will probably be necessary, otherwise you're going to have that Core 10 leach out onto the concrete and could stain long term. But I really hope that this building goes in this direction, because I think David's comments were really correct. Like an orangey metal is going to look very different than a Core 10. So if you were to do a paint, for instance, and there are paint products, and in Whistler they ultimately went for the paint-on product. So next time you're out there, if you have a look at those signs, that's what they use. If you do pursue a brewery, I would suggest maybe looking at the internal layout a bit differently, and perhaps going to more of a mezzanine style for Unit 5, so you could actually provide full height for 35 feet for your brewery tanks. You'd also need to have that access for trucks, and I think you can get some small trucks in there, but even integrating something like a grain silo or something at the front edge of the street where they could drop off, it could be possible. It just if that's the route you're going, I would speak to someone that operates one of those businesses, because there's a lot of things you can look at to change this up, to accommodate that a bit better. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful building, but overall, I hope it doesn't set the tone for light industrial buildings in the industrial park, because as unsightly as Tilt Up can be, it's probably the only way we're getting people into these buildings at a rate that is affordable to industrial businesses. But that said, overall, I think the building looks great.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I was going to touch on a lot of the very similar things. I think the biggest one for me was that sidewalk in the front is probably like bare minimum. Not the one on district land, but the one in front. I think it was actually already said, with those doors opening, I just can't really see how people can get around those doors with the amount of flow, the traffic of people coming and going in front of the building. And then, I think it was already said, the staircases. It just seems a little awkward just to have one. I think it's a 4-foot staircase right now. I can see a ton of people walking up and down there and only having sort of one access to the front of the building based on that staircase and accessibility. And then I guess my other main thing is, like, if you're thinking about a brewery in that unit, the amount of deliveries coming and going from the brewery for trucks. I mean, I'm not super versed on how big those trucks need to be, but coming and going and having to back out or back in and drive out seems like a big mistake that way. I think the building looks great. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, so yeah, I think that given how you have it set up right now, that the driveway is the access down to the sidewalk, that's just not, from a safety standpoint, not really a good idea. So to either look at maybe doing some sort of long ramp along your retaining wall, or expanding the width of that drive aisle to allow safe travel. And additionally, given the challenges of that, then I would suggest that you put make an additional accessible parking stall on the other side of the access aisle. So it's already sufficient space given the access aisle is there. Yeah, I think that the stairways up to the front sidewalk should be wider. And additionally, make sure that there's some high contrast on the stair treads and nosing, because right now it's just reading all is gray. Yeah, those are my main comments.
Thank you again. I think as a project, I get your concept and how it's coming together, and conceptually you're doing a block form and it's sort of rising up out of the ground, and you've expressed that with verticality. And then the horizontality is coming into play with the landscaping. You're sort of trying to ground it in that regard. So I think that as conceptually it fits, and the way you've staggered it, where it responds obviously with an arc is obviously a direct response to the site shape. So it's got a really interesting form and character, and I think the landscape is quite complementary. Actually, I quite enjoy how it all sort of fits off of a plinth, and that obviously it has its scale through materials, so that's great. I think the larger comments I want to sort of articulate are really centered around maybe 2 or 3 things that I think needs to be considered. And it's almost like the building needs to loosen up a little bit, because with what it's saying is that you said, well, we're going to have a patio for the restaurant, given that it is going to be a restaurant. And it seems like it's built right to its extremes, and it needs a little bit of relief, but I would hate for it to take away from the concept, which is a very strong shape. And I think it's tight, it just needs to loosen up, it needs to relax. And I think once you look at that as a shape or as a form, and it may be just a slight skewness, you'll find there's probably an opportunity. You'll get the wider paths, you'll get the proper accessibility into the building. you probably have more upfront visible storefront type space. So you can have a patio, as you were mentioning you wanted to have or trying to have, and your patio could be on the south side. So I think without giving up your concept and what it is, I think a slight adjustment will allow you to have that, and I think that would probably sort of deal with the comment of it needs to loosen up. I think the second most important point is it really needs a study by a transportation consultant, and these types of projects rely on loading, and if they're relying on loading, they need to obviously work at different levels. And that's only because that it's not going to be a brewery forever. It's going to be another type of retail or industrial or anything else use. So it's one of those things that when you're doing a retail space or a project, it needs to actually be convertible. So we can't think of this as just office upstairs or a restaurant or a brewery. It really needs to think about its convertibility. So loading has to play into that. So the backup and the loading access really needs to be studied, I think, and I think it could be that your loading is perhaps closer to your doors rather than so far away into the back where it has to turn around and get out of the site. Made some comments about code compliance. I think they can be handled, but if code compliance isn't done properly, you're forced into water curtains and other things. So it sounds like you'll address that in your own way. I think that one of the danger points for us a little bit too is that we're all talking about a material, and the material looks beautiful and it sounds like it might be even durable, but as a design panel, we're actually mandated in our ethics of talking, we're supposed to be talking about what the material is and is it acceptable or not. And we don't have a sample and we don't know what it is. And if it's not clearly articulated or written on the drawings, it gets through an approval that it could be a material for value engineering that we don't know what it is, and it won't be durable and it won't have the look and all these other things. So, but I think that the key point perhaps around it is that if the project's continuing, it really needs the documentation to say it is going to be this material for it to be considered. I think the other comments, just some of the other colleagues, I think your comments about just I think we talked about accessibility, I think really needs to be addressed. And the overhead coverage, I think, is also a very valid thing, an approach that needs to be considered. And just lastly, I think when we're looking at the upper space, it almost seems like it's not tall enough. The ideas of having overlook and loft space are great, and I think that needs to be studied a little bit more, and maybe needing a couple extra feet up there to function. So it's something perhaps that we look at. In general, I think it's very supportive, and I would like to just to offer those comments as something that you can consider in a future application. And at the end of the day, we're living with what we see and what's written. So the devil's in the details on a lot of this stuff, and it really shouldn't change too much from what we see. So I think again, focusing on loading, materiality, and accessibility and loading, I think that's probably the bigger issues for this. Otherwise, it's a great project. Thank you.
Cool. I did most of my comments earlier and questions, right? I think it's a really ambitious design. I really like that. It's nice to see something that's not just a box and a grey box, so I think that should be applauded. My earlier comment, I think it needs more connection to Queensway, and I think that's maybe been a missed opportunity, something wider steps and more access up there. And there's also a bus stop there, I don't know how people get up there. And then the bicycle parking as well, really needs a lot more of that, far more than the bare minimum. I like the shape and I like how it's the stepped roofs. And then basically I covered everything I had to say about the materials, and that's from being on other ADPs, it's really important that we understand for form and character, which is the largest thing, what is the material that we're assessing, because I know that Core10 is very expensive. I've tried to use it before, I've never managed to, so I feel like this might be this could happen with this, and if we're looking at a copper penny flat metal, it's just has no patina on it, it's a completely different building. Yeah, and that's it. But otherwise, I really like the shape.
Great, yeah, thanks to the team for the package and the presentation. Yeah, I commend you, as you've heard, on the use of quality and elegant materials with the Core 10 and the black steel. I do think this is a great precedent in a block of fairly standard tilt-up industrial buildings, and I think it'll set a great tone being the first building on this block, but I appreciate the comments about affordability of leases. The design, you know, the massing, it's expressive of its use, generally seems to meet the design guidelines, and though I appreciate the reflection of the road curve in that facade. Landscape, appreciate all the greening, especially along the frontage. I think it's probably compressing some of the other objectives. You've heard it with opportunities for patios, entrance sequence, the sidewalk along the front. So maybe that needs a rebalancing. I heard mention of the mature trees in the rear yard and the try to retain the mature trees through the process. I would encourage just to retain the mature trees. I think it's a significant addition to a site, those mature trees as opposed to just all new plantings, so I encourage you to do that. In regard to the site plan, you've heard a bit about it. I think that's where it starts to fall apart a bit for me. It seems really balanced towards the rear and the car-oriented use of the site. I think the sidewalk at the front could be expanded a bit. Again, accessibility, the entrance sequence through the front door. The opportunities for patios, especially with the uses that you're proposing, on the frontage expressed towards Queensway rather than put towards the back of the building. And the ones that are proposed in the rear of the building seem to be just out of residual space. The proposed patio area is fairly small, interrupts the circulation around the building, and so I think more thought needs to be thought through with tying those outside public spaces with the uses that you're talking about. The hydro kiosk at the front of the building, I think also could probably be moved around a little bit to the rear or side yard. The bike parking, again, for the uses that you're proposing, there's just not a connection there. One, the Class A lockers on the exterior of the building, the Class A, I forget the name of them, but in my experience, I haven't seen really good use of that type of bike locker. So I think I would encourage more Class B spaces consolidated in a central spot at the exterior of the building. Again, tied to the uses that you're proposing, and then Class A internal spots for work or the residential unit, those which are spending a longer amount of time in the building. That's my comments, thanks.
Thanks. Okay, my turn. I'll just start by saying I feel like this is the first building in the business park to blatantly pursue the retail type use that we obviously have concerns with. Under an I-1 zone should be preferential towards light industrial, or in other words, you might look at building a building that could be any number of uses in the future. It's hard to just peg it to one, and I'm not totally against purpose-built buildings, but I believe that this area is you know, you really look to sort of find good accessibility. That's hence the concern over transportation in and out, good loading doors, roll-up doors for those bays that may or may not be a fitness facility in the future. So these, in general, I actually really like the look of the building, and the shape and structure does lend itself to light industrial. It's just the accessibility in and out of the building and the parking areas and whether or not trucks can turn around in there, because I think especially on this corner of Queensway, you're going to find that if a large truck like an 18-wheeler has to make a delivery, they're not going to be able to stop on that corner, and they might end up having to stop down the block, and then you're transferring goods to bring them in and this sort of thing. So it just, I guess my concern that I would express is that if you have tenants in there that find a lot of difficulty in working within this parking area that you have and delivery area here, they tend to start to use the public space. And so we're affecting the public space around. I guess my other comment is that if you have a fitness facility on one side and a restaurant on the other and a warehouse in the middle, and who knows what they're doing in that warehouse, but it sounds to me like we're inviting an incompatible set of users, and it could spell out trouble in the future between the user types and the parking. And you know, if the parkade is full of people for the restaurant and fitness, and the guy in the warehouse is going, how do I get in and out to do what I do? But that is going to be a management issue in the future, and the usability issue. So if you solve these things ahead of time, you might find happier tenants and hence higher rental rates and so on and so forth. So it's just good to look at this, and I'm glad we're going through this. In general, the image of the building on Queensway, I think it looks great. I think actually it will be a really nice statement in the business park. So I can't go against that at all. But the functionality is the concern. So and obviously with two of the sort of highest parking uses in two of the biggest spaces on the main floor, I really am concerned about that parking area becoming full and then spilling out. You know, people wanting to park along Queensway or nearby. The comment about the bikes is actually a very good comment too, because obviously that gives people another option, and if they arrive every time and find the biking area is full, it's not going to work so great. Of course, those things can be added later, I would imagine. The elevator, one small comment on the elevator, just to make sure that it is easy to load into and out of on all levels for larger items. That will probably be really helpful. And that's it for me. So, with that said, we need to look at our options for the project as a panel and choose one. I'll read through them. That the advisory design panel supports project and overall land use concept as presented. That's option A. Option B is that advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. And then we would agree upon our recommendations. C is that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present the project again to the advisory design panel. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons.
I'd like to make motion C.
C?
Support.
That's a second?
Yep.
Okay, and that C is that we would like the applicant to resolve recommendations and return to present project.
Well, I think that we need to know for sure what kind of metal cladding we're going to use, and then see what happens with the circulation. And we'll decide.
Okay, so we will, at this point, vote on whether or not we're going to go with C and then do the recommendations that go with it? Or do the recommendations come first and then the vote?
Hi. I think if we were going to vote, then it'd probably be easiest to do the first vote on which option, and then if we know which option it is, then we can clearly set out the recommendations.
Okay. So we will vote for whether or not we go with C.
Does the applicant get an opportunity to respond to the comments, or do they don't? Okay.
Through staff after we're
Or
finished.
even after we've spoken, they don't?
No.
Okay.
So if the vote is defeated for C, do we have an opportunity to move another motion?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So those for C? That's 5. And those against? 3. So we are going with C. And now we would move on to those specific items that we would like addressed before a return to advisory design panel.
If you want, I can kind of overview what the comments were and then, does that work?
Do you want to do that and then pick out sort of some main ones, because we've got several?
Do we typically do that with the applicant in the room, or do we discuss it?
Well, we go through them and we discuss it, and then we
Okay.
can pick those that we're going to add to the motion.
Okay, so comments included the limited opportunities for use, the materiality, the concern for interacting with the, and the long-term wear, rain garden friendly trees, the parking overhangs, and encouraging plantings in those areas that are thoughtful to the parking overhangs. Too narrow sidewalk along Queensway. The staircases were referenced a few times to be either wider and or more of them. Accessibility in general from a parking area standpoint, and also from Queensway sidewalks, both the one that runs along the building and the one in front. Railing designs were discussed, guardrails versus the handrails. The internal layouts, so looking at heights and truck loading from potential uses, i.e. a brewery. The tightness of the sidewalk with opening doors. Sorry, there's just some duplication. Ramping, potential rampings along the retaining wall for accessibility from the Queensway side. Additional accessible stalls. High contrast on stair treads. Overall loosening up the building, adjustment to the design to accommodate more flexibility in use. Transportation consultant. Height of the upper space to be considered. More connection to Queensway, more increase of bike parking, and also considering the storage of the bikes, interior and exterior. Mature trees retention, looking at the site plan overall in terms of balance towards the rear and car accessing. Proposed patio that interrupts the connectivity around the building. Hydro kiosk. Looking at preferential towards the light industrial uses, and again flexibility in use. Truck loading was referenced a few times, and considering the combination of users becoming incompatible. And elevator size and ensuring easy access loading.
Do we need something there about having some confirmation of what materials can be used?
Sorry, I just said materiality, but
Okay,
it encompassed, the actual sample.
So to return with samples of the material. Sorry, Jonas?
I just want to preface a little bit. When we go back and work with the applicants, we'll take into consideration all of those recommendations, but we might not be able to resolve all of them. We have to work within our guidelines, the zoning bylaw. And there's a few variances here. They're fairly minor, so I just want to caution a little bit that we'll work on everything that's practical and that is within our statutory ability.
Understood.
So I think the way that the minutes would then read is that if you choose C, it would say based on the recommendations listed in the comments. Or you can list them specifically, right?
Yes.
How is everyone with that list of comments? Anything in particular? Or does that sound pretty good as a list to work with?
I think it was good. It's a bit of
I
duplication.
just clarify the concerns with the materiality was just about durability and longevity.
And getting a sample to actually see.
Or I think it was commitment to a type of material.
Commitment to
That's my
material.
interpretation of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine, just don't want to engineer it out.
Yeah.
I'll add that commitment to the.
I think that's it then. The project. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
here we are. We're back for the next part of design panel. The second item of business is waterfront landing, preliminary park design. And this is always exciting to bring forward a park for a project. So we'll turn it over to the applicant for description.
Thank you, through the chair. I didn't realize we're going to have a couple of new members today, so I'll just go through 2 or 3 slides to set the stage for this park and how it came forward. When the waterfront landing development was rezoned and did a sub-area plan basically a year and a half ago, the park was one of the requirements. So the site is on the Mampum Blind Channel, the total waterfront landing site. It's 21 hectares in size, bounded by the Blind Channel on the west and the railroad line, Sand Rail, to the east. When the plan was adopted in 2017, a phasing plan was established and basically lays out the program for how the site is going to be developed. So parcel 1 was approved for the DP in 2017 for 88 townhouse units, and it is currently under construction. So the applicants have now submitted the DP application for phase 2, which is a larger parcel, and the ADP looked at the townhouse project in September, and the applicants are currently working on the recommendations that were made. As part of the requirements for phase 2, not here. Let me just see if I can counter that. Oops. Okay, I've got a partial map there. I don't think I can fix that on the fly. Up in the upper corner, you will see what is the waterfront park, which is attached both to phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 that go off the page. The waterfront park is a requirement that kicks in under the land development agreement when phase 2 begins construction. The design of the waterfront park has to take place. The construction of the waterfront park will take place with their adjacent phases. So once the design is approved, the construction will go along with phase 2, and the other parts of the park will be constructed with their adjacent phases. The other related and important part of the triggers with phase 2 is construction of the pedestrian bridge that runs from the commercial center in Waterfront Landing across the channel to Victoria Street with downtown. So both the waterfront park and the pedestrian bridge are really important amenities to the district. I would say to the whole district, not necessarily just to the residents of the Waterfront Landing development. So that's just the background to how we got to this stage. So I will turn it over to the applicants to present all of the information regarding the park.
So thanks for your time today. A few new faces from about 2-3 weeks ago when we were here for phase 2. My name is Wayne Vickers. I'm with Boza Properties, representing the Boza family and the Siegel family for the development of this project. Our project team is here. With me today is Derek Lee with PWL, who's been leading the design of the park, and also members of our team as well. So. We're very excited, obviously, the park setting, to be here today with its setting next to the Mampum Blind Channel. It's a very integral part of the, pedestrian fabric of the community. Its natural kind of passive setting to which it's been designed. And we look forward to hearing what you guys have to say, and I'll turn it over to Derek. So.
Okay, thank you very much. It's not often you get a park coming through a design panel, so we're very pleased to be presenting this to you today. Just to put this into context, we always like to start from kind of the broader context is, the development is really one that's uniquely positioned along the Mampquam Blind Channel. And I think that, in our approach to designing a park, and frankly the entire waterfront community, it is really inspired by the surrounding geography of Squamish. And the other thing to point out is that really the park in and of itself is part of a constellation of a future park network and waterfront trail network that's really going to define the city of Squamish, the downtown precinct. This is located on the east side of the Mampquam Blind and will be connected by a pedestrian bridge. So really this is going to be seen as a major amenity for not only this particular neighborhood, but the city as a whole. Just to put this into a bit more context, what you see sort of on this is the North Park. This is the park that we're actually looking at here. It's important to point out that the park is part of a broader program strategy for the site in terms of how the open spaces really create a sense of place for the community. So we have North Park. We also then have Waterfront Landing, which essentially will be the neighborhood center. And this is where the community amenity will be. We are currently exploring a major public plaza, which will look different than you see here. We're looking at sort of opening this up to the Mampquam Blind and to the inlets, such that becomes a much more intensive space for programming long term, for events and things like that. And then there's the South Park here, where essentially that would be connected to the North Park vis-a-vis a continuous waterfront boardwalk that would effectively run along the edge of the Mampquam Blind. And then, of course, the future pedestrian bridge connection, which will connect to downtown. So really the vision for this park is one that is all about outdoor recreation. There are moments in the park that will be defined as sort of hard space, but really it's more geared towards flexible use, and we'll get into that. The other thing to point out also is that this is defined by the adjacent Phase 2 development, which is essentially along here. And that interface is something of importance. We want to make sure that even though there's sort of this abrupt gradient between the private interface of the yards and the park, we want to look at that in a very careful way. And also really embrace the idea that, as many of you may have seen in the previous panel application, there's a series of linkages, green linkages through this neighborhood that provide those fingers of green connections into the park. So we really want to create a permeable environment here. These are just some existing photos of the site. This is the existing marsh condition on the site. You also get a sense of what the foreshore condition is along the length of the water here, looking east along the Mampquam Blind. This is D, which D and E are essentially the crown land, the foreshore environment, which is effectively outside of the park scope per se, but does represent a fairly ecologically productive zone that is really part of a broader Green Shores initiative that we'll talk about momentarily. Photo C here shows kind of the level of disturbance on the site as well. So looking, hold on, just jumping around here. So looking at the next slide here, this kind of paints a picture of the broader vision for the park. And so here we are sort of standing closer to where the neighborhood amenity space would be, where essentially the boardwalk further to the south would turn and really reveal this North Park. And the idea here is really to really create something that's inspired by the surrounding context. And so the borrowed landscape, as we like to say, of the mountains reflected in some very interesting undulating topography within the park. Some of the ecological initiatives which we're currently defining as an intertidal marsh, which would be not only a place for enhanced habitat, but also the way for park users to access the waterfront in different ways. And further beyond, we'll talk about this, but we're currently looking at a playground, sort of an active playground, incorporating natural play, and sort of a bike skills park as well as some large, generously sized passive lawn space, open space. So just as a bit of a park overview, you can just see some of the features here. This is sort of the more urban condition, sort of at the south end of the park with the access and lookout points. That it's more sort of defined by the urban condition of the amenity building and the retail landing here. The perched beach, you can see, wants to be something that's a little bit more natural in its form. And we are currently working with Tetra Tech, who are the civil engineers, on sort of hydrodynamic modeling to ensure that this is a feature that's flushing using a concept of a weir, and whether that weir is a constructed wall or whether it's something that's more natural. That's where current discussions with the district on that. The intertidal lagoon. So again, we're playing with water levels so that this is wetted all the time. So you have a 4-meter difference in tidal fluctuation normally, but we don't want that in the lagoon. We want something that's wet during an entire tidal cycle. So we're playing with the levels using the weir concept. The community walkway, one of the things is that we have actually a whole series of walkways that happen through the park, but one of the things that we really wanted to define is that this edge condition here, whereby you have hedges, gates, sort of a stoop style patios that might come out onto a public walkway. So there's a very clear definition between public and private, and it's not ambiguous. Other elements such as the mounds, the play elements, the bike skills park, all those things concentrated within this section of the park here, really try to create more of a natural playground, play environment for the park for all ages. And we also want that combination of informal lawn space as well, picnic areas. Here's the lawn further to the north. And we also have a shoreline trail that really provides access along the entire foreshore, providing filtered views through the riparian vegetation to the Mampang Blind Channel. So again, just in a little bit more detail here, one of the key features of the park, of course, is the lagoon. And you can begin to see how we're beginning to sculpt the existing land, bearing in mind that the current lagoon, there's actually a current marsh condition here, so this is part of a sort of a habitat balance strategy, albeit this is going to be intertidal rather than freshwater. And the idea is that this is also not receiving any major inflows of stormwater too. And that has become part of the problem of the 3rd Street detention pond, where there's been some issues around influx, pulses of water coming in, creating sedimentation issues. And so what we're really committed to with the district is to ensure that this feature flushes adequately, to ensure that we don't have stagnation of water in here. That's a very big issue that we're concerned about, and we have ways to ensure that that doesn't happen. The other thing that we want to talk about is that just the nature of we'll call this the east side of the pond here. This is essentially the future dike level. So this all is essentially built at 4.53 elevation for the future dike. And at the same time, we wanted to take advantage of that condition by creating sort of an a boardwalk edge along here. So that would provide some nice prospect over and into this water feature. And also allowing sort of a bridge feature over the weir here that allows for sort of a perimeter walkway on this side that's much lower. This is down at about 2.5, much more intimately connected to the marsh. So really as a concept, everything outboard of the proposed 15-meter setback, as we're calling it, for a future weir, for a future dike rather, is subject to inundation through major flooding events. And we're currently working with the district on allowing that to happen, while at the same time preserving major features such as the playground rather, and other major structures that need to be above a 3.5 meter flood construction level. Everything else can in effect be inundated. We're also looking at a bike skills park here, and again, we'd be working in consultation with a professional bike skills park designer. There are certainly expertise here in Squamish around that, and we don't profess to have that expertise, but the idea being that it essentially is more of a naturalized track. It's different than a pump track, that really creates some more kind of flexible skills building opportunities for cyclists in the area. And the other thing to note is that this red line here really defines the edge condition for the park, albeit, as mentioned in the photographs that you saw, most of the foreshore environment here is crownland, and that is sort of the intertidal foreshore that won't necessarily be a part of the park exercise, but is part of a broader Green Shores initiative, which is really about restoring the foreshore environment and creating net gain in habitat and so forth. So this is just kind of the end of the park here with the more flexible lawn. Also to note that in the future there's plans for a daycare that would have its own connections and playground, but it's important to note that that would have some interface onto the park. We have also a fairly exhaustive planting strategy for the park, much of which is focused around aquatic and riparian vegetation, really trying to focus on native species as enhancing the ecological performance of the park. As you can see here, within the footprint of the lagoon, there's a lot of in-water planting within the lagoon, and those are quite sensitive to different elevations. So it's sort of like underwater terracing, if you will, for different types of planting. And this is why we also want to maintain the water levels as best we can within there, so that we're really achieving about a ½ meter fluctuation as opposed to 4 meters outward of that. And some native, or call it near native plant species in more kind of the urban or sort of plaza spaces and along kind of the edge conditions close to the development. We have a plant palette here. I'm certainly not going to go into all the details of it, but one thing that I should mention is that we're sensitive to the Green Shores strategy, the Green Shores initiative, which advocates for some specific types of berry producing plants as an example. At the same time, we're also sensitive to making this park bear safe, and so there's strategies around not having certain species of plants to avert bears from coming in and grazing. So that's a very important consideration in Squamish. As far as kind of the sectional conditions go, just focusing on the lagoon for a moment here, we are looking at, if you look at section 1, kind of a profile of what the weir would be, and so the idea being that at elevation 2.5 would effectively be the high tide mark, and this is where water, the high tides would inundate into the marsh, and as the tides go down on the left side, the release rate of water on the right side would be at a much slower rate. And so the idea being that as it comes down to a ½ meter, it's already ready for another flush, overtopping with high tide once again for like a 6-hour tide cycle. This is also the section 2 here, which looks at kind of the typical cross-section of the lagoon as we talked about, where on the left side of this section you can see the elevation 4.353 being the future condition for a dike. But at the same time we want to encourage stepping and terracing down. And one of the things that's really important about this to consider is that there's a lot of local material to be used within the area here. There's actually a stockpile of white granite on site that was actually quarried nearby. And we're really committed to using that material for terraced boulder conditions for the foreshore. There's also kind of the edge condition that would be planting here and here that would basically create that continuous green edge around the lagoon. And another section through here that essentially shows a continuation of that profile, what an island in the middle might look like that will be partially submerged. This gives you a sense of the boardwalk, a small boardwalk condition here with seating, and the perimeter walkway interfacing with the private residences beside that. The section number 4 is really showing that profile of the children's play area. And again, you know, you can see that we're really trying to maintain the existing condition beyond the property line here. We're not doing any regrading within Crown Land. And we're focused on maintaining the elevations of all major structures, could be the play structure here, of course, above the 3.5 level, and eventually making our way up to the 4.53 flood construction level for the dike. Similar conditions here with the bike park. There's, as in some of the other sections, there's going to be some fill that's required just to kind of make these grades. Not a lot, but a bit. And then, of course, with the more passive open space further to the north in section 6. So this actually looks at the what we're sort of calling a bit of the inlet. So the idea being that there's a current inlet here, and we want to maintain that. But at the same time, we're sensitive to how we want to encourage access down to the water vis-a-vis sort of these arrangements of granite boulders that provide sort of informal natural terraces down to the water's edge. And in this instance here, in section 3, is essentially where we're trying to, we're designing a perched beach condition. And so there's a perched beach condition and also kind of an in-water beach condition here that would be constructed out of loose aggregates and provide ways for people to really get down and touch the inlet. The section number 4 is really just illustrating where within the property line we do have foreshore habitat particularly around the nose of this peninsula. This is within the Crown Land area. Sorry, Crown Land's outboard of that. This is inboard of that. There would be some commitments for a combination of a hardened edge, but in-water aquatic planting and so forth. So precedents, this gives you a bit of a palette of what we're talking about here. We really want to focus on keeping materials local, natural, native planting, but creating interesting moments as well. And you know, we'll be looking at informal seating of different types, and urban habitat. With bird watching, and maybe we'll probably be putting in some moments such as birdhouses or interesting things on columns. Perhaps. This gives you a sense of kind of the intertidal terracing and benching that we would be looking at within the lagoon. And then in terms of more active activities within the park, one of the things I should mention is that the playground will be put out to, we'll be consulting with the public on this in the second week of November. And so, our belief is that it wants to be something natural. There's these great Kinsale play structures that are, using reclaimed timber and such. And we believe that's kind of an approach, but we want to go out to the public and get their feedback on that as well. Of course, using natural topography with slides and mounds and that sort of transitions into the skills park. And also, with respect to materials in terms of the paving, one of the things we're really sensitive to is that because this is a fill site, there may be some differential settlement. So we want to be sure that, for example, if we're using concrete paving, we're very focused on creating frequent control joints, or it's a modular concrete paving system. And then certainly where we expect tidal inundation during major events, maybe 10-year events, that the material isn't washed out. So right now, we're currently reviewing whether even a bounded aggregate is enough, or if it needs to be almost like a resin-bound aggregate for some of the trails that might create a more robust assembly to withstand inundation from waves. Just not to dwell too much on the Green Shores principles, but I think they're important to mention that it's really to preserve sort of the natural shoreline processes ecologically. We really want to maintain and enhance the shoreline habitat diversity to reduce environmental pollution and to reduce the cumulative impacts to the shoreline ecosystem as we design sort of coastal projects. And so one thing that it also focuses on at the same time is ensuring that we have shore-friendly public access. So it's not just that Green Shores isn't just all green, all ecology. It's also about balancing human access with that as well. So I think that within our means, within the park, we want to try to encourage that, whether it's the view deck / weir, whether it's the boardwalk providing outlooks and things like that, or the stepping down into the water in certain points. And so this is where we're showing some of those Green Shores principles, sensitive to the tidal levels as related to the shoreline ecology, planting pockets of planting along the foreshore within our site. The natural foreshore, while out of our scope, that's a separate process with the province. Flood protection at the same time, as I mentioned earlier. This is a very simple diagram, hopefully easy to understand, but where the alignment of the future dike would go. And so, everything, including the marsh, is expected to be fairly soft intervention that will probably need to be adapted to over the coming decades as sea level rises. But it's really, the purpose of the dike is really to protect private residential property. So that's the whole flood management strategy with the dike. So essentially that's it. I'm not going to walk you through the whole design rationale. Hopefully we did a good enough job of that. But we would be open to questions. And I guess, was there anything else that we wanted to speak to as far as the Green Shores strategy at this point in time?
Let's get close to a mic if you can now. Thanks.
Yeah, so we've taken a close look at the entire park design and taken a lot of the Green Shores principles in mind, and have worked with the entire project team to incorporate where we can shoreline soft structures on the outside, potentially conserving the outside of the park, which is a big part towards the Green Shores strategy. And a number of the features inside are also considering planting and different Green Shores strategies. So if you guys have any questions, please let us know.
If I could just raise one question. Can you go back to a slide that shows the dike area?
Maybe the plan enlargement?
Just the one that shows the colored strip.
Oh, yeah.
Broad strip.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify, in case it wasn't clear, that there isn't actually a dike being built. That 15-meter peak area is an allowance for a future dike should one ever be needed. And that's looking ahead to the 200-year flood construction level. So there isn't actually a dike being built.
That's right.
If one is needed, that's where it would go. So just to clarify, there isn't one. There's no dike being built.
Yeah, and that represents a 45-foot, basically SRW right away. That would be provided to the district.
So that 45-foot or 15-meter SROW essentially goes from sort of the projections of the building to the 15-meter mark. It's not to say that the dike will occupy that. It will probably be 6 to 7 meters, but that width would allow the construction crews to access behind it and so forth, right? And for long-term maintenance of that.
Okay. And the outer edge of that is set at it's a predetermined for the 2100 flood level as well. So its height is 4.8 meters. So it's and then the FCL level of the homes themselves is set at just above 5. So there's minor gradual sloping from the outer edge to the homes.
Great. That's everything?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Before we get into questions, we'd just like to mention that we are currently today without our second landscape architect, and we would really like to be able to offer his comments formally to this project. Obviously, it would have to be remotely, so with the blessing of the applicant, we'd like to fold those into the meeting here and bring them back within the next, the minutes, I would imagine of the next meeting, they would be reviewed and brought in, and then you would have the benefit of those comments as well, so just wanted to make that note.
So that means we would delay the vote?
No, we won't, but we can still invite that Crossland has an opportunity to make comments. Whether or not there's something that are actioned on, that's probably not the case, but they're available anyway as an asset for consideration, so, yeah. So we'll start with questions, if you have any.
Yeah, sure, thanks for the presentation. Just one question, just in some of the elements, the mounds, etc. Just could you clarify if there's any consideration around the elements, in particular, I'm thinking of wind, which is substantial in Squamish, particularly in the summertime?
It's a good question. You know, I think that you know, we do a lot of projects where we mitigate the effects of wind through careful placement of trees. So one of the things is that yes, we're doing mounding. We also have, as best we can, sort of continuous sort of stands of trees that provide sort of continuous canopies. And so we're also trying to focus seating underneath tree canopies as well. So they tend to do a good job in functioning as windbreaks, at least at a human scale, which is really what you're looking at for this site. And there's also going to be the retention of a very significant section of riparian trees. Those are the alders, the cottonwoods, and things like that, that will also provide sort of a natural windbreak from the prevailing winds coming down the channel. So hopefully with that, it's relatively contained from a wind perspective.
Okay. I do actually have a second question too. Just in regards to this diagram, I understand how it works for flood protection, but just the principle, the Green Shore principle of shore-friendly public access, can you just clarify, particularly in the intertidal zone, how that works, considering the amount of riprap and terracing?
Yeah, so I think that we're not really, you know, we're picking up from other experiences like on the foreshore of Southeast Falls Creek and other things, is as best we can to create sort of natural access to the water's edge. And you know, from an accessibility standpoint, we also want to create sort of equally significant experiences to that water's edge too, because you can't necessarily get down in a walker or a wheelchair or carrying a pram down to the water's edge. You know, we want to create some projections, and we believe that that would be kind of the bridging going across the weir, and it would also be on the south end of the park some viewpoints, these timber deck viewpoints, and along the entirety of the lagoon as well, with this boardwalk deck.
Right.
But yeah, we want to, what we're thinking is that it may also be, with respect to the terracing, you know, a combination of kind of natural boulder placement, but in areas we may want to have some flat cut surfaced boulders or terraces that might come down in some very specific areas that might also control access into specific points too.
Okay. And of course you got that whole naturalized area along the channel itself.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, hi. Are the community pathways bike pathways or pedestrian pathways?
Well, they're primarily pedestrian pathways. I think, to be honest, it's probably a conversation with the district to what degree they want to sign these as sort of combined pathways. But I think given the fact that we've essentially designed these pathways relatively narrow, I mean, they're not like 4-meter combined use pathways. I think the priority certainly is around pedestrians. Knowing though that, you know, with the Bike Stills Park, you know, that there will require access for bikes. So I think it's a good question around, you know, how to manage different modes that may be moving in and out of the park here. So yeah, that's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just for context, because what's the expected population of the development as a whole that would be using this?
So we will have approximately just under 1,000 homes. So, and half of that is made up of townhomes, and the other half in apartments, 4 to 6-story structures.
So you'd expect about 2,000 people?
Yeah.
2,000 to 3,000
yeah.
people?
Yeah.
Two more questions. Is there any public art? I didn't see.
Yeah, so I think that's certainly a separate process with the district in terms of going through a process where there may be a public art plan, there may be then through that plan specific allocations of installations in certain areas. It certainly hasn't been part of this initial design process, so I think that's ultimately a conversation, understanding their requirements for the park, the district.
And then the last one, the lagoon is quite large.
Yeah.
Is there anything to take that particular size, or is it?
Yeah, so we're currently going through a process right now to determine what factors are influencing the habitat balance strategy. It's all about sort of a net gain of habitat at the end of the day, in principle. And there was a previous marsh area here that had to be replaced in some form. And so the approach here was really to replace it with sort of an intertidal equivalent, if you will. A slightly different ecology from a freshwater ecology, but still seems to conform to the Green Shores initiatives and is supportable by the district.
What's the process? Is this a preliminary, or is this a rezoning application, or does it get resolution today?
The process is, it's actually a development permit application. The park is a requirement of the residential development, but it's also a requirement of the covenant that was placed when the whole project was done. And but it is also in development permit area 1 and environmental, so the district does have to issue an environmental DP. So this is kind of the preliminary stages of that, because it's such an important public feature, we're treating it a little bit differently than normally you wouldn't see an environmental DP. But because of its importance as a public park, we're trying to get input from both the public and the design panel. But it is, yes, there will be a DP issued.
And then to add to that, it is preliminary because we still haven't done any public consultation on it, and that will be the next stage.
Who maintains this bridge? It's owned by
the district.
The district, yeah.
Yes, the land will be dedicated. The subdivision isn't finalized yet, but all the land will be dedicated to the district, and the district will maintain it.
Maintains all the materials that the...
Yes, and that's influencing some of the district comments on materials.
Right. As far as circulation, what would be the commitment at maybe the ends of the project where? What would be the commitments maybe towards the ends of the project? So it's designed as a park, and then it ends at the bridge, I guess, and then it also it ends, where your community center would be, and it has an excellent connection to all of the rest of the development areas that are to the south. But how does that work? Is it you design a park, but then how do you connect to it?
Yeah, so all the connections that you're seeing, so focus on the south end of the park here, they would connect to the areas within the development site. So actually, the area that you see here is actually it's currently being designed by another landscape architect, and so the idea being that we are committed to making those very clear, viable connections through there. So we have a connection in phase 2 here. We have a connection essentially that would link to the to Laurelwood Road along the south perimeter of the neighborhood amenity building, and to the south along the boardwalk. So we very much have those surrounding connections in mind. And part of the other thing is too that on the north end of the park where the daycare is going to be, it hasn't been designed yet. There will also be a surface parking area directly to the north perimeter of the park. Hasn't been designed yet. So bearing in mind that those areas will definitely be taken into account, is because we do want to create clear entry points into the park. There's no question about that, right?
Then is it dog walking features and dog use? It sounds like it's a real mix, which is excellent, but you get into other questions that the district will be dealing with. Dog management.
Certainly dog management is one that we've discussed a lot.
You could put a little no dog park.
There's been some great examples of parks we've designed that are not fenced off dog parks. You know, they're not a pen for dogs. So I think you're right. I think it's management through signage, through user education and awareness. And I think there's some good precedents within Squamish already in terms of how people use parks with dogs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it seems you haven't determined what the aggregate surfacing is going to be yet?
We're working through that right now. I think that, number one, it has to be universally accessible. That's a prerequisite. So whether it's a naturally bound aggregate or sort of like a resin-bound aggregate, you know, it has to be fully accessible to wheelchair usage and so forth. Yeah.
Similarly, the play safety surfacing, can you tell me
Yeah.
that?
So that would be mulch, right? Sort of a mulch surfacing. So it would conform to, you know, playground safety standards. And yeah, so we want to use natural materials there for sure.
Okay. Have you considered any connections to the picnic tables?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And so perhaps maybe what we should consider is, you know, a hard surface connection to all or some of the picnic tables, and probably have a wheelchair accessible projection to them as well, to ensure that you know, that they're universally accessible. Yeah, good comments. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I guess my first one is to do with the lagoon. Does the existing lagoon no longer exist? Like it was there before, it's now been eliminated?
It's a stagnant, contaminated area that needs improvement.
Right, so we're not concerned about wildlife or anything that was in the existing lagoon?
No.
There is a photo of it.
I thought I saw something.
It's bottom left there.
Yeah, right.
In your package on page.
So this is on page 4, the package.
Okay, yeah.
This is probably what it looks like in its best condition. But it's not, you know, what you're looking at there is eelgrass, and you know, it's a fairly boggy condition here. The other thing to note is that a lot of the surrounding vegetation right now is suffering from, the site is sinking, right? And so you have this saltwater lens that's actually affecting the roots of a lot of the trees. So you're seeing some die-off of trees and things like that too. So as the foreshore subsides, so you know, there's that to consider as well for the long-term health of sort of creating a new habitat that doesn't do that.
That's it. Can I just add in something to that? My name's Jeff Levine. That lagoon, it's not a historical, how that lagoon got built was during the highway construction. They needed the sand off the site. They scooped out all the sand in the middle, and they made, including this area, and that kind of naturally occurred in this area. This is a former mill site, it's an industrial brownfield site, and inside of that, it looks kind of nice in this picture, but actually it's all filled with wood debris and industrial debris. The big thing that we're talking about is it's 1,800 square meters right now. That's a surface area. We need to keep it at 1,800 square meters, and that is the reason why the lagoon is the size. So what we're trying to do is increase habitat and make it a accessible thing and with Green Shore's applicable standards, and build it so it's actually a productive aquatic environment. So if you go there now, it's pretty much an asset. Just to answer one of the other questions you have about Green Shores. One concept in Green Shores, it's just not about preservation, it's also allowing access to the public and education. So we think we have a really good mix with this lagoon, especially seeing the intertidal.
Okay, that answers my question as far as the lagoon goes. The steepness, so the weir from one side to the other has quite an elevation change, I understand?
Yeah, so we're currently working through the design of the weir with input from the district right now. It's not we're currently deciding whether or not, a vertical condition, weir condition is acceptable, or whether that needs to take on a more natural profile.
So, that's a great question. The problem is Squamish with the 16-foot tides, and we all understand. So what we're trying to figure out is we're working with Tetra Tech, who are hydrology engineers, and they're experts in understanding circulation of the water so it doesn't end up being a smelly pond. We really do need to keep it, we want to keep it wet in there because with such an elevation drop of the water level, we don't want it to be dry or just damp because it will start smelling and it will start bringing up all the bugs and stuff. So what we're trying to do is match the elevation of the weir structure, whether it's a natural weir that's built with a cascading wall coming down towards the Mountain Channel, built up with some different rocky material, or if it's a manufactured straight wall weir, we're going to have it so that the height of the weir is at about a mid-tide. So any water levels from mid-tide above will overtop the lagoon, and that's at about 1.5 meter geodepth.
Just one more. The bike park, I think in your presentation you mentioned that there's a lot of expertise in the area on the bike park. Is it going to be a local company that's used to design, build, consult?
We're trying to model
that. The idea?
Yes, yeah, we're trying to model it off the really popular Alice Lake Park, Provincial Park, Vice Hills Park, as well as the Wetland Park that was done with Sorka. So we'll be using the same similar. There's a couple of different companies that this
Thanks so much for this. I think the design looks great, but I have a few questions. Has this been looked at by a geotechnical engineer yet?
Yeah, we have geotechnical expertise that's been involved through the whole course of the project so far, and we'll continue to do so for sure.
Okay, on some of the cross sections, it looks like you have some foreshore planting kind of on top of the rock structures. Can you maybe just speak to how that will
So, as an example,
section 3.
Is it the section 3 here?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
Bottom left.
All right, so section 3. So we've done this in the past. Essentially what you're doing is you're creating planting pockets, right? And so that includes, you'd have your sort of gravel or your rock substrate, and then you'd line it, and then you'd have pockets of growing medium, right? And so if it's something like, eelgrass or what have you, you have probably about a 6-inch depth of growing medium within there. So it's not to say that it would necessarily be continuous everywhere, although you can do that as well. So I think we also have Warren here that might provide some insight into that as well. Keystone Environmental.
Warren Appleton with Keystone Environmental. We do a lot of shoreline enhancement projects with DFO and various different projects. When you're getting plants to grow, obviously in the intertidal, obviously don't grow on the rock itself, right? So there are proven technologies, or I guess ways of having them in a bank or in amongst rock. You have a soil pocket and you pull the material there. There's different ways to do that. And so I think the idea with this is that you can incorporate some, it doesn't just have to be a rock everywhere. You can incorporate some green plantings in with the different slopes.
Okay. Was there any consideration for a covered area, or is there a covered area in close proximity to this park or play area, Phil?
So far we have not designed a covered play area or a covered picnic area or anything within the park itself at this point in time. But that's a good consideration.
Okay. And my last one is there any interpretive signage planned for the site?
So the signage strategy came up. I think we have, our thoughts is that it would incorporate the district's downtown signage strategy, probably continuing through the park.
So that's like from a wayfinding perspective, but was there any idea to maybe tell the story of kind of the history of the site and the park?
Yes, and we've certainly discussed that as well. I think that there's certainly the history of the site, there's the ecological functionality of the site, and I think those two stories would be very important. If on the boardwalk, for example, you might have an interpretive sign that you can look at, saying, understanding the functionality of the marsh and so forth. Yeah.
And also some of the structures that we contemplating, some of the wooden structures that we have. So it's a bit of an homage to what the site used to be. It was Interfor. It was the largest employer in town.
Yeah.
And it was a big sawmill. And that was the center of town for a lot of people. So telling that story as well, with the story of how we transformed this really industrial brownfield site into a thriving habitat environment. That's something that we want to do. Obviously, it's not it's the district park, so we've got to make certain they're okay if we put all these signs up that they want to maintain.
Yeah.
I guess my first question is, I guess we should assume that there is some kind of water safety consideration happening here. People do funny things in the middle of the night when they're sleepwalking from their homes. How does that play into your design along the water's edge as you go all the way around?
Well, picking up on our past experiences on waterfronts like this, everything would be designed with the building code standards in mind. So, like for example, whenever you do a boardwalk, and if you didn't want to have a railing system, if you wanted to have a bull rail, we'd make sure that there's no more than a 2-foot drop beyond that. So anywhere where we are having, a bridge condition or a lookout that's cantilevered over, we would expect to have handrails, like 42-inch high handrail. So I think that coming up with some adequate tactile cues are important for everyone. Not just the mobility impaired is going to be important, and edges. There's if you have a stroller or something, and it's being it starts to veer off, you want to make sure that you have an edge there.
Like a bumper stop?
Yeah, like a bull rail. Like it might be like a 9x9 timber bull rail, which we've used on many of our projects. It seems to work quite well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll certainly with building code standards, we want to design to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no lifeguard chair that's sitting right in the middle of that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and also recognizing that we are close to a water body. That's part of the reason why we're trying to keep the water body quite shallow, and no conditions where you're literally just dropping into a deep section of water. Everything's sort of gradually stepped down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there ever a water park considered as a part of one of the amenities for the area down there, or is it somewhere else on site, or is that an idea that?
It's an interesting thought. In fact, it's a thought that we are actually looking at more in the plaza right now. There's been some early conceptions of that idea, at Waterfront Landing.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is that the park here, it's more kind of a passive, obviously there's a playground, but it's more kind of a passive space, and then where we get into sort of more intensive interventions with mechanical systems and such, it would be kind of within the neighborhood, sort of waterfront landing area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
I just visited one of those parks in Merritt. If you ever want to see an awesome example of it.
Yeah, no, they're great.
Just unbelievable fun.
Yeah.
I was running around in the thing. It's just, and it didn't even look that complex to achieve. It's so just a thought on.
Yeah, water's a huge attractor for people, no question about it.
Yeah, it would be well received in the town, I'm sure, as well.
Having it in this type of park, though, it wouldn't make sense because if it's usually has to be really hardened, it needs to be in a hardened environment, like in the plaza, more so than in this area.
Yeah, it's that rubber surface that you just have a little flat area that's treated with the rubber.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the infrastructure underground.
Oh, yeah.
Hardened, it would really take away from the natural part of the environment. So we're gonna, if it was putting in a more hardened area like more concrete around.
Yeah.
One of the limitations in this area is that we can't have any mechanical systems below the flood level. Right, so we're really squeezed from a grade standpoint in doing stuff like that. At best, we can have a slab for play structures, but even that has to be above the 3.5 mark. So when you're actually looking at some of these profiles through the park, you know, as best we can, we're trying to maintain, this lower one here, we're trying to maintain as much as the net of the existing grade as possible, but to build in chambers and things like that would go against the flood construction level.
Yeah, that's good information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, all my other questions were asked, so that's fantastic. I guess we'll go to a round of comments at this stage.
Great, thanks to the applicant for the presentation and the detailed package. I think it's a very positive design that integrates a lot of elements really successfully, and I think it's an exciting addition to the Squamish waterfront, not just in terms of delivery of a park, but also opportunities for integration with the shoreline, which is something that is missing from Squamish currently, both for the new residents that are going to live here, as well as the town in general, broader population. I think it addresses the questions put forward in the package. I think the balance between active and passive uses and the division of space is great. Appreciate the parsing out of age groups in the playground particularly. Love the natural elements, and I hope that plays out through the end of your consultation process. Active play and the proposed activities, I have no doubt the bike park is going to be successful, given how much I know my kids like the Brennan Park one. I would use that as kind of your base starting point as far as size and elements. Maybe also consider some uses for the adult population that's going to be down there, so whatever that might be, volleyball courts, fire pits or something, I'll leave that to you. Connectivity, I think the paths are great. Obviously caution if it does become bike pedestrian use, combined paths aren't always so successful, so maybe there's some separation, but I think that can be resolved in future stages. And then the only questions I had was about Green Shore and access. Thanks were addressed in the comments.
Okay, yeah, it's a great package, really detailed, and nice to take us through from the outset, you know, going into greater detail, which is always helpful. The main one, three comments. The separation of the bike and pedestrian. I've lived in Vancouver for 5 years and seen people step out of their nice Yaletown townhouses onto like a pathway with bus cyclists and stuff. Never ended well, so it'd be great to be able to cycle in there and not have to dodge pedestrians and dog walkers. The population, knowing that there's going to be so many people there, I almost feel like there needs to be larger open green spaces. I just think that when you get pop-up concerts or like outdoor cinemas, there's a greater, you get 2,500 people going to this park on Saturday, they want open space. There seems to be lots and lots of trails, lots of intersections, lots of defined areas. I like the passive open green space by the water. I think that almost needs to be amplified a little bit. I didn't know that the lagoon had to be a certain size, because my comment would have been that I think the lagoon almost takes up the real, the best part of the park as opposed to the linear piece. And then just the arrangement of the bike park. I think personally that I would maybe the bike park closer to the road at the end of the park, and then have the green space in the center. Just because the green space at the end is the sort of where you're going to go with a picnic and a blanket, and you go through the whole thing, and you're actually going to be closest to the road. So, yeah. That's it.
Yeah, no, again, I think it's a great project, and it's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, you described it in your words, it's a coastal project. It has the closeness to the water and the variety of things that are related to the water and the options. It's about access, and you're certainly making provisions for access throughout different areas of the development, and I think that's obviously very strong. I agree with your comments, actually. I'm glad you said it. I didn't realize it until you said it, that there is something about these sort of layers of spaces that you do inherently want, because the bikes, you don't want to segregate the bikes from the people walking, but at the same time you want to be able to have them layer, I think, of it. And I think maybe, to your point, that's probably one of the other things that just should be considered, or could be considered. And the other comment I agree was that this idea of this pop-up opportunity, like, you can imagine somebody just deciding they want to drop a blanket and sit down and have a picnic or something. And I think those pop-up opportunities are actually quite interesting, because what they do is they talk more about what human trace is. Like human trace is, you know, you take a campus and then you watch everybody just sort of walk through it and they create their own paths. And I think that's a little bit about what this pop-up thing is about. So there is something kind of neat about it. You've got tons of variety. There's certainly, you know, scale has changed both longitudinally and vertically. I think it's all there. I think it's a great opportunity. And I think as for the district, you know, I think there just needs to be probably some more commitment or definition or let's just say commitment sought to, you know, how does wayfinding work? You know, how do you know, if you needed to navigate, is there a way to do wayfinding? The ideas about public art you know, could be explored and added here too, if that's what you wanted to push, but certainly again, loading up all of the variety that's already there. I think there's a language in this. We're not seeing anything really to secure a commitment. We're not seeing a lot of like the materiality in the sense. What I mean is like what is the park bench like? You know, what are these ideas? I mean, there's wonderful concept and ideas, but as it moves forward, I think the district should be securing a bit of a commitment in that regard. But you know, is it right of ways, and how do you get these? How do you ensure these connections at the perimeter, rather than it be just a chain link fence, which we do see in some developments, right? You just see a beautiful park go up, and then you can see all these chain link fences that you can't get to. So I'm sure that won't happen here, but I mean, I think a lot of that really comes out of a commitment or the language from the district to the applicant. And John, I think I agree. The resolution probably should include some an additional comment from landscape to make sure that we're architects. Unfortunately, there's another wonderful layer of talent that's missing from this table today. So that would be great if we could hear from them. Okay. Otherwise, that's a great job. Thanks.
Hi, yeah, I agree. I think it looks great. My comments would be just around accessibility. So I would encourage you to have some pathways to maybe at least 2 of the picnic tables, at least at ends, as well as there's some picnic tables that are beside the bike parks, and we have one of those that would be accessible as well. It seems that the benches are on concrete pads in the children's play area and in one of the passive open spaces. And the second passive open space is just to make sure that there's going to be space adjacent to the park bench for maybe buggy or wheelchair.
That's right, yeah.
Additionally, I would encourage you to have a variety of seating types. So that some are going to have backrests, there'll be some armrests, and that your pathways are going to have some cane detectable edges and some points to enjoy the experience. And if you do some interpret signs, to have some raised lettering and possibly braille, maybe look at some tactile kind of things that, you know, if there's a carving or such, that's an experience for somebody visual.
Yeah, sure.
But otherwise, yeah, I think it looks great.
I think I'm just going to echo a lot of what was already said, but I was thinking, David mentioned something, the bike park being kind of near the end of the park would almost kind of work better just for allowing, like you said, that many people congregated in one area, rather than kind of spreading out all over the place. I really hope, I saw some photos of the park, and I know you said I think it goes before like a public hearing to decide what the playground is actually made of. But I hope that it's as abstract and kind of interesting looking as what you guys have on here, rather than just sort of like a metal, plastic, typical rubberized playground that everyone's installing these days. That really stood out to me. And yeah, I think it looks great. I like how big the waterway is as well, like the lagoon. I feel like it takes a lot of space, but at the same time I think that's going to be a pretty massive feature.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
I missed one comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to say possibly do sort of a bump out around the children's play area. So for people standing and viewing, that they're not going to be blocking the path of travel and, excuse me, pardon me.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess I'll commend you on dealing or interpreting the district's flood hazard management plan. It's a pretty comprehensive bylaw, and I think people that are developing right now are kind of on the forefront of what accommodating for sea level rise and that change requires. And I think you've demonstrated really well. One of the biggest issues in my mind with the kind of livability of that bylaw is that you're about, at low tide, you're 16 feet plus another 3 meters below the water. So, you're 22, you're towering above the water. So that lagoon, I have some concerns, and I hope that there are some precedents that you can look at to see what the smell might be like, because, even if it's not stagnant water, there is kind of a smell sometimes around the estuary and the blind channel. But I think it's wonderful for being close to the water, which is something that we will lose all around Squamish with this new flood hazard bylaw, because we're going to have to be towering over top of it to protect all our homes. So I think I hope that people see the complexity with this site when they look at that. And I commend you for how you presented this. So I think I would hope that in the future, if there's an opportunity to talk with the Crown, speak with the Crown about even just finding, in an area where you're sloping down quite mellow into the Mampam, to provide some sort of kayak or paddleboard access, because I think that would be great for the people living there at least. And I know that basically along all the parts of your shoreline that have a mellow slope, you're going to have to work with the Crown on that one. So maybe that'll go to the district to do. But I think it's really interesting because, and when I've looked at the Mampam Blind Channel from an environmental perspective, it's a dead zone. There's very little aquatic life that really lives in, and I think that by having a project like this that's going to be planting and introducing some natural vegetation, it should go a long way to helping to restore that channel. And so I hope that whatever you do on your property, things grow in BC pretty quick. So I hope that quickly moves into the Crown parcels and helps out there. I had this kind of same comment, there's so little passive open space in Squamish that's going to be accessible from an urban perspective. And a lot of people in Squamish go outside and they go into the mountains to enjoy themselves, but I think there's still a big place for that open space, and the more we can have, the better. So where you have your trails kind of sweeping diagonally across, I would say around the passive open space, try to straighten them out to create as much of that space as possible. Cuts down on hard surfaces too, which I think is a plus. I also hope that the playscape is natural, but I know that as this is a district park, you're going to get a run for your money with ops. So good luck with that one. So I was kind of talking about interpretive signage for a few aspects. I think there's a history of the site going back to Squamish Nation and the original peoples that inhabited Squamish, and then I think all the way to telling the story of Interfor and then what your company's done to kind of clean up that area. Removing the creosote piles and all those things. I think that's an important thing to highlight on all of the sites around Squamish that are seeing this revitalization. And my comment on covered space would just be if you can explore even a small covered space around the park. I know Squamish kids get put in those onesies that make them impermeable to water, but parents usually don't wear those. So if there's just a little area for everyone to huddle in the cold, I think that would be great. But otherwise, great work.
Thank you. All right.
Like a pagoda?
Is that what they call it?
Like that?
Well, just like a little, even just like a lean-to.
Yeah.
Where
I think
everyone
it's
can
a great
sip their
idea.
coffee, maybe with some spiked coffee, and then just play out the rain.
Watch your kids get wet.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is exciting to see, and can't wait till it comes to reality and we can go down there. One of the things that I'm really excited about the pond, but I'm really glad you guys are kind of thought that idea was lost, and I'm glad to see it come back again. And the idea of the weir is really interesting to me because I would rather just see it full all the time. Of course it needs some flow and whatnot, but seeing what happens over in the Mampam Blind when the tide goes out, and it's really not all that interesting over there. You probably know what it looks like. I wish they could build a weir of some sort over there and retain at least some water in that area. So this idea is fantastic, and I hope that when you figure it out, it really works well. And, you know, possibly we could have those little power boats ripping around in there, or a sailboat or what, so probably sailboats in
Yeah,
Squamish. I know there's people that do model sailboating that would be perfect for, so you might have started a whole new club of people in Squamish. My only other comment, aside from, I think it might be a really good idea for the bike park to sort of move down towards the east side. That just seems to make sense. And if you were to have open gathering space in there, it sort of brought to my mind that what are your examination of your viewscapes to the west, where we've obviously got our sunsets happening on that side.
Right.
So if that's something that is in the next iteration thought about, you know, what are the views going to look like across the other side of the mountains and whatnot, so that it's you could create some fantastic views sitting in the park if you're thoughtful about it. So I think that's the only comment that I have. Everything else has been covered. So at this point, are we voting on this today because it's a preliminary design?
Well, we would still like you guys, I mean, we've got a ton of comments, which is great, but I think let's follow the standard format about whether you want to see it back or not. I did put those 4 resolutions in, which don't always fit these types of projects very well, but I think just, I would still like to have you go through that formality.
Shall I read them really quickly again so that we're... Option A is that the advisory design panel supports a project and overall land use concept as presented. B, that advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project in general and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to advisory design panel in future. D, that the advisory design panel does not support the project for the following reasons.
Seconds.
Okay.
What was it?
B.
B.
Yeah. And Sarah, and who
Sarah
wanted
and...
to second? Okay. And I think we'll vote on that. All 4? Against? Unanimous? And so our comments,
Go through them?
do you want to go through them? And then we'll...
It's up to you.
Do we need to go through them?
I think we've got a really good listing. I think,
Yeah.
I've got good notes. Carly does.
If anyone reads the meeting minutes in future and wants to comment on something
always
they
go
don't
back
like,
to the
then they
video.
can. We have time with this, I would imagine. And I guess the one last point would be that we would like to request formally that Rosalind Oak, our second landscape architect, make his comments remotely, and that we could receive those and add them into the minutes from this meeting.
Yeah, I noted that when you mentioned it.
Should he be seeing our minutes though, to see what our comments were?
Yeah, we could just email him the whole package and then he could chime in. I'll ask what's legislatively.
You can also review the video too and hear what first
Sure.
Yeah.
everybody had to say. Yeah, it's always fun.
How I spend my days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you. All right.
Any roundtable discussion from anyone? Any topics to bring up?
That's good. You go to sell the take rates?
Treats at every ADP meeting.
Where's the first one? Where's the treats?
We have a motion to adjourn. Second?
Was it Mike? Oh, Sarah.
Sarah.